I, 43 male, found out my partner, 44 female, lied about a years-long affair with her married friend, a secret relationship that lasted years, full of lies, cover-ups, hook-up during work hours, sexts, photos, etc. Now I don't know how to trust her again. I often find myself wondering how I got so lucky. My partner, she's 44, is the most wonderful human being I have ever met. We've been together for 3 years now, and even after all this time, I still catch myself smiling when I think about her. She has this incredible way of making the world feel lighter, calmer, and somehow more full of possibility, just by being in it. We met through work, back when we were both at the same company. It wasn't one of those lightning bolt moments or dramatic love at first sight stories. It was slower, steadier, the kind of connection that builds quietly until you realize it's something solid, something real. We got to know each other over long days, shared challenges, and the kind of conversations that happen when you're both trying to make sense of the same chaos. Eventually, the professional admiration turned into something deeper, something personal. We don't work together anymore. I've moved on to a different company, but we're still in the same industry. It's quite a small world, really, where reputations precede you and people are often connected by a few degrees. What we've built together goes far beyond work. We're both divorcees, each with children from our previous marriages, 5 between us. That could have been complicated, but instead, it's been one of the greatest blessings of my life. Our kids have blended in ways I don't think either of us dared to hope for in the beginning. There are still the occasional bumps, of course. Anyone who's navigated a blended family knows it's never all smooth sailing, but at the heart of it, there's love, respect, and laughter. Watching them bond, seeing them become their own kind of family, has been an unexpected joy. About a month ago, we found ourselves with a rare night to ourselves. No kids, no plans, just the two of us at home. Those evenings have become something of a ritual for us. A nice dinner, a few glasses of wine, some music, and long, winding conversations that stretch late into the night. They're the kind of nights that remind me how easy it is to be with her, how natural our connection feels. That night was no different. Or, at least it didn't start that way. We'd had a good meal, opened a bottle of red, then another, and eventually a third. By then, we were both well past tipsy, that pleasantly loose, laughing stage where honesty flows a little too freely. We were talking about someone from my company who'd recently left under a bit of a cloud, someone we both know and, frankly, don't think much of. The conversation drifted, as conversations do, from that person's reputation to stories of others in the same circle. That's when she brought up something that changed the tone of the evening entirely. She mentioned that one of her closest friends, a man I also know fairly well, had been arrested years ago, accused of sexually assaulting the very person we'd been talking about. I remember just blinking at her for a moment, trying to process what she'd said. She wasn't at the event herself, but she told me that her friend had confided in her afterward, insisting that everything that happened had been entirely consensual, that it was just a drunken hookup that one of them regretted later. According to her, the police had investigated and eventually dropped the charges. She spoke with such certainty, such fierce loyalty, that it was clear she believed him completely. I could see how deeply she cared for him. Not in a romantic way, at least not overtly, but as someone she trusted and defended instinctively. She said she knew in her heart that he wasn't capable of what he'd been accused of, and that the whole thing had nearly destroyed him. I remember nodding along, trying to take it in, torn between empathy for someone falsely accused, if that was truly the case, and a quiet unease I couldn't quite name. I've known the man for a few years myself, through her, and on the surface, he's always seemed decent enough. But then she mentioned, almost offhandedly, that his wife had never been told about any of it. That the whole thing had been swept under the rug, kept secret between them and a few trusted friends. That stuck with me. Not because I wanted to judge him. God knows, we've all made mistakes, but because of the realization that my partner had carried the secret for years, protecting him, shielding him from consequences. She even said, somewhat guiltily, that he'd cheated on his wife many times before. I didn't push her on it at the time. I could see she was already regretting bringing it up, her expression tightening as the wine wore off and the weight of what she'd said began to settle in. We let the conversation die there and moved on, but the unease lingered long after we'd gone to bed. Over the next few days, I found myself replaying the conversation in my head, picking apart every word, every tone, every glance. Something about the way she defended him, so instinctively, so emotionally, didn't quite sit right with me. It wasn't jealousy exactly, but a feeling that there was more to the story. After about a week, I couldn't shake it anymore. I sat her down one evening and asked, as calmly as I could, if she had ever slept with him. There was a long pause before she answered, the kind of pause that tells you everything before the words even come. And then she said yes. She told me that they'd slept together a couple of times, years ago, around the time of her divorce. She said it wasn't planned or ongoing, just something that happened after a few too many drinks when she was at one of the lowest points in her life. She said he'd been there for her as a friend, someone who listened and supported her, and that things had blurred in ways she wished they hadn't. She was clear that it had been brief, that it had never turned into anything more, and that she'd regretted it deeply. Not just because he was married, but because she valued his friendship and hated that she'd crossed that line. A couple of weekends later, everything I thought I knew about our relationship shifted again. It was a quiet night, the kind we both cherish. We'd spent the evening at home, cooking, having a glass or two of wine, and watching something mindless on TV. She'd fallen asleep on the couch, curled up under a blanket, breathing softly, completely at peace. I remember standing there for a moment, just watching her, the woman I loved more than anyone, and feeling grateful in that simple, quiet way that comes at the end of a long week. Then I saw her phone on the kitchen counter. I wish I could say I didn't think about it, that I turned away immediately, but the truth is, my curiosity had been gnawing at me since that conversation about her friend. Something about her story, the pauses, the way she'd chosen her words so carefully, had left cracks in my trust that I hadn't been able to fill. I told myself I just wanted to reassure myself, to put my mind at ease, to prove that I was overthinking it. But deep down, I think I already suspected there was more. I picked up her phone and scrolled through her messages. It didn't take long to find what I wasn't meant to see. There they were, dozens, maybe hundreds, of messages between her and her friend. The further I read, the colder I felt. What she described to me as a couple of drunken flings years ago had, in truth, been a full-blown affair that had lasted 4.5 years. 4.5 years. The messages were explicit. Detailed plans for when and where to meet during work hours, sex that left little to the imagination, photos, inside jokes, the easy shorthand of people who'd shared far too much for far too long. And threaded through it all were the words that hit me the hardest: affection, longing, fragments of conversations about how much they missed each other, how they couldn't stay away. There was one message from him, written months after she and I had started seeing each other, where he confessed that he still wasn't over her. It felt like being punched in the chest. I knew, rationally, that it was all in the past, that she hadn't done anything to betray me directly, but that didn't stop the flood of emotions. It wasn't jealousy as much as betrayal of honesty. I had asked her, openly and gently, to tell me the truth, and she had chosen not to. She had looked me in the eye and downplayed it to almost nothing. I couldn't stop hearing her voice saying, "It was only a couple of times." I didn't sleep that night. I sat awake on the edge of the bed, staring at the dark, the weight of everything pressing down on me. My mind went in circles: disbelief, anger, sorrow, confusion. I thought about the woman sleeping peacefully in the other room, unaware that the person who loved her most had just watched the foundation of that love crack beneath his feet. When morning came, I knew I couldn't pretend. As soon as she woke up, I told her. I said that I had read her messages, that I knew about the affair, the full extent of it. I told her I wasn't angry that it had happened before me, but that I was crushed by the fact that she had lied to me when I had asked her directly. That she had looked at me, someone who had always tried to be open and honest with her, and chosen to hide the truth. I told her the most important thing to me has always been honesty, not perfection, not innocence, but honesty. I wanted her to feel safe enough to tell me the truth, to know that I wouldn't judge her for the life she had before me. I love her for who she is, for everything that's made her who she is, and I had wanted to believe we could build something that didn't require shadows or secrets. What followed was one of the hardest, rawest conversations of my life. She cried, and so did I. And then, slowly, she began to open up, really open up. She told me the truth about her past, about other colleagues she had been involved with over the years. People I knew. People I'd shaken hands with at industry events, maybe even shared drinks with. Each new revelation hit like a wave, and for a while, I just sat there, trying to keep breathing. She told me that during her marriage, and especially in the years after it began to crumble, she had become drawn to men who were unavailable. Married men, men who couldn't offer commitment. At the time, she didn't want to be tied down again, didn't want the vulnerability that came with genuine attachment. These affairs were, in her words, a way to feel wanted without risking being hurt. It was, she said, her way of taking back control when her life had felt like it was falling apart. And as much as it hurt to hear, part of me understood. The irony, of course, wasn't lost on either of us, that when she and I first met, I was still married, too. My marriage had been over in every meaningful sense, but still legally intact. She and I had fallen for each other during that liminal period when everything in my world was shifting. In a strange way, I suppose I fit the same pattern, another man she couldn't really have, at least not yet. By the end of that conversation, I felt utterly drained. There was no anger left in me, just exhaustion and heartbreak. I loved her, still do, but I didn't know what to do with everything she'd told me. It was too much to process all at once. The person I thought I knew so completely had suddenly become a stranger in certain ways, and I didn't yet know how to reconcile the woman she was with the woman sitting across from me now. Since that morning, life has felt a little different, quieter, heavier somehow. We've spent countless hours talking, crying, holding each other. Some nights we stay up until the small hours just trying to untangle everything, the past, the pain, the confusion, and what it all means for our future. Neither of us wants to give up. That's the one thing that's never been in question. For all the hurt, for all the cracks in the trust that once came so easily, we both know we still want the same thing, a life together. I love her. God, I love her more than I can put into words. She's not just my partner, she's my best friend, my confidant, my safe place. I've seen how deeply she loves, not just me, but our children, all of them, hers and mine. She's an incredible mother, patient, warm, funny, and fiercely protective. Watching her with them is one of the things that first made me fall for her. That part of her hasn't changed. And yet, there's this new weight between us, this invisible thing that lingers even when everything seems fine. The hardest part now isn't anger. It's doubt. I find myself questioning things I never used to think twice about. If she tells me a story about work, I catch myself wondering if it's the full story. If she mentions meeting a friend, I have to push down the flicker of suspicion before it takes hold. It's not who I am. I've never been someone who checks up on their partner, never felt the need to. But now that trust, the quiet, unthinking kind of trust that underpins everything in a relationship, feels shaken. We've talked about seeing a therapist together and separately because we both recognize that we can't fix this on our own. We've also agreed to keep communication as open as possible, even when it's uncomfortable. I've told her that what I need most is consistency and honesty, even when the truth feels difficult to say. And she's promised that she's done keeping secrets, that she understands why I'm struggling to believe her, and that she'll wait for me to find my way back to trust. How do you rebuild trust after discovering painful truths from your partner's past? How do you stop questioning everything they say when you want so badly to believe them again? Can love alone be enough to carry a relationship through betrayal, even if it wasn't directed at you personally? How long does it take before honesty feels real again, and not like something you have to search for? Has anyone managed to truly move past something like this without resentment creeping back in? Should I keep asking for reassurance? Or will that only push her further away? How do I balance my need for transparency with her need for forgiveness? And most of all, how do I hold on to hope without losing myself in doubt? I know it is all very recent, but I would love some advice on what steps to take next. How long will it take for me to trust her word again? Has this changed our relationship permanently? I cannot imagine my life without her, but I cannot be with somebody who I can't trust 100%.